Hi, everybody. Has the United States slipped into becoming an authoritarian country? That is one of the questions that we pose today here on the Sanity Podcast. Please like this episode and subscribe to our podcast. Dave, great to see you. We posed that question to our old pal, Elie Honig, who has a new book out, which we'll get to. And he had a really interesting response. He has a hot take on how authoritarian is not the right word to be using right now, and he'll explain himself.
Yeah, it feels like every day we are creeping towards authoritarianism, so it was comforting to hear what the longtime CNN analyst had to say. He also weighed in the likelihood of tariffs being shot down by the Supreme Court, the future of the National Guard being called into cities not named D.C., of course, the Epstein case and why the existence of that female-shaped Donald Trump letter in the Epstein birthday book, why that really matters. And Allison, I better mention the juicy details of his book when it comes to Bill Clinton and something that will blow your mind. But we started with the importance of the Supreme Court at the moment as Coney Barrett is making the media rounds, releasing her book about the same time as Elie's, which is When You Come at the King. Here is our interview with Elie Honig. All right, Elie, great to see you at a time when, wow, what a fascinating legal time in which we reside, which the Supreme Court and presidential powers are about to collide. And Coney Barrett we don't get often that Supreme Court justices do the media circuit, but let me just play you something from Coney Barrett, because Supreme Court trust has never been lower in the United States. And here's her response to Fox News' Brett Baer.
Outside perception is not the inside reality.
That's right. You know, we don't wear red and blue. We all wear black because judges are nonpartisan. And the idea is that we're all listening to the law. We're all trying to get it right. We're not playing for a team. We don't sit on specific sides of the bench, left and right. You know, we sit in order of seniority.
Your response, sir. We are not attorneys.
First of all, I like Coney Barrett. I met her. She was actually I did a thing a year ago where I was an advocate at the Shakespeare Theater in D.C. I represented Lady Macbeth versus somebody else who represented Macbeth. It's a big thing they do every year. And Justice Barrett was one of our judges. So I had a chance to speak with her. She was delightful. I found her really interesting. I disagree with many, not all, but some of her opinions. But what we just heard from her is such a bunch of crap. And these books, I'm going to get competitive here because my book is going to be out on the market the same time as Coney Barrett. That book is a snooze because they're all the same, all these Supreme Court books. It's all going to be, no, everybody, we are pure. We don't impose our ideology on people. We just wear black and sit 1 to 9. We just, I don't even know who's who. I mean, give me a break. Like, why do they even I know why they bother with these books, because I think it's been reported that she has a multi-million-dollar advance. But like, God bless you if you want to buy Coney Barrett's book, but be prepared to be bored and be prepared to have a bunch of stuff about how pure they are thrown at you. I think, you said before, Dave, like the Supreme Court has all-time low public confidence ratings. And I think when we're told things like that, that's a part of the reason why.
Elie, I have so much to unpack there. First of all, why didn't Dave and I come to your Shakespearean debut in Washington, D.C.?
It was in D.C. That's primarily why. But let me say, so first, two things. First of all, I opened up by quoting Taylor Swift, among others. I even sang a couple bars of Taylor Swift, and the crowd did not leave. It wasn't great, but they didn't leave.
Time out. What did you quote, and give us a bar?
Okay, so my opening, you had to do a half-hour argument, and they wanted it to be real. Like, we had to put in briefs, Supreme Court-style briefs. I went back to my old law firm, and they loaned me 2 associates to write the brief. But they wanted us to be funny, and you could quote The Simpsons or whatever, in pop culture. So my opening theme was, isn't it just like the guy to blame the woman? Throughout our history, every time some guy has done something bad, he's always blamed the woman. It started with Adam and Eve, right? Like, oh, she made me bite the apple. And then I went through all these examples. In fact, Bill and Hillary Clinton was one of them. Donald Trump was one of them, nasty women. I turned that one on the crowd. I did the Trump one first, and this is a DC crowd, and they loved it. And then I did a Bill Clinton thing, and they were like, oh, it goes. And then I said, allow me to quote, I said, as we are gathered here in this shrine to the great 17th century English bard, let me quote from the great 21st century American bard, Taylor Swift. And I had asked my nieces, what's the best, Taylor Swift, angry at a guy who did something wrong to her lyric, and they said all of them. But then they gave me a lyric from a song called Mad Woman. Right, a song called Mad Woman. And so I said, let me quote from Taylor Swift. I said, in fact, let me do it right. I'm going to sing this for you. And I did it, and it's on Instagram somewhere. You know, I got it was the moment when you have a huge round of applause and you're like, okay, there's 800 people. And I'm like, okay, I'm fine now. And I said, thank you all for listening to that. I want to assure the court and the audience there will be no further singing.
Whoa, you're not getting off the hook. Yes.
That's amazing.
Bring it.
I don't know if I can remember. There was like, I can't find it on Instagram. There's nothing like a mad woman or something like that. I can't remember the lyrics is the problem.
So perfect for Lady Macbeth.
Yes.
That's the perfect one.
Exactly.
Elie, you are a man. You're a Renaissance man. You're a man of so many talents.
Thank you.
I just have one Amy Coney Barrett thing to say and chat about Elie, because I heard that interview that she did for CBS Sunday Morning. I guess it was that, maybe 60 Minutes. And now what Dave just played. This is what's interesting to me. And I want you to help me understand this. I know that they don't see themselves as partisan hacks. Of course. I know that they think that they follow the law and don't impose their politics on it. However, they do impose their worldview, their decision, as we all do. I mean, that's what just natural kind of inherent bias is. And so I even have evidence of this with Amy Coney Barrett. She explained in this interview how being a working mother of 7, including the mother of a Down syndrome child, affects the questions she asks and how she sees the world and her decision making. And so, of course, we're all products of bias. And isn't she saying that she is too because of her life experience?
Well, I like the way you said it. I do not actually see them as just partisan hacks. Like, I don't think they care about Donald Trump himself. Maybe Alito and Thomas do. But I don't think they're like, we're going to help out Trump here. I think they come to this with worldviews informed by their own experience and also informed by their sort of judicial philosophies. And that's why I sort of reject these arguments of like, we just... You know, of course, they're influenced by everything that's come before, of everything they've done before. A way I've heard Stephen Breyer put it is, and again, this is maybe a little bit naive, a little bit overly optimistic, but he said, you know, when he's asked, were you aware of politics? Did you consider politics? He would say, well, it's like, I couldn't tell you what the temperature was on a given day, but I could tell you what the overall season was. In other words, we're generally aware of politics, but it didn't influence us on a day-to-day basis. But, you know, again, there have been some decisions where I'm not so sure that's the case. I mean, going back to the Bush v. Gore decision, that pretty clearly split along partisan lines. I think the Trump immunity decision, which I talk about in this case, they went pretty far in that case. I mean, it was clear he was going to get some immunity, but they went really far in a way that I think was certainly had the effect of preventing him from being tried before the election.
But how far have we gone in the last, 6 months have been astounding in terms of the expansion of presidential powers. And back to my question, is this separation of powers? Are checks and balances actually under threat at the moment?
I think we're seeing a fundamental change. And one thing I argue in the book is what's happening now in Trump 2.0 is fundamentally different from what's happened going back through history. And especially specifically in this book with respect to when it comes to outside prosecutors. They've had different names over the years, independent counsel, special counsel. But, you know, in the book, I give inside reporting from the people who actually tried these cases, defended these cases, were prosecuted, FBI agents, White House officials, going back to Watergate. And one thing that struck me is the common threads really have been there ever since Watergate. In fact, going back to Ulysses S. Grant, he was the first president to ever appoint a special counsel. And guess what? He fired him, as did Harry Truman. Harry Truman fired his attorney general who had appointed a special counsel. But so a lot of what we had seen up to now is not as different from what we had seen in the broad stroke of history. But the common factor has been no president wants to be investigated, right? And presidents to varying extents have tried to undermine or interfere with or obstruct special counsel. Nixon and Trump 1 probably being the worst offenders. But what Trump is doing now is fundamentally different than all that. He has made clear there will be no investigation of me or anyone around me by special counsel or anyone of any other name. And anyone who ever has thought about doing that or has done that, I'm now going to strike back at and get retribution on. That's different from what we've seen back to Watergate and beyond.
And what do you call that, Elie?
What do I call what?
What's the word for what Donald Trump's doing?
For what Trump is doing? I don't know if there's one word, but I guess you could say, a legal scholar would say the unitary executive, meaning he is the executive branch and the executive branch shall do his will. I don't like the more dramatic words like, people call him an authoritarian or whatever. I think that's a little far. But I certainly think he's changing our balance of powers.
Because I have bandied about the term authoritarianism, what distinguishes it?
Because we do have other checks on him. I don't think look, there have been court rulings against Trump the last several days and weeks even that they abide by. I don't think real authoritarians will take a loss in the Supreme Court and absorb it the way he will. He'll complain about it. Don't get me wrong, but he hasn't defied them.
It's interesting to me, Elie. What has he abided by? Because I know that we're going to talk about how Trump did a lot of emergency actions this summer, and then the court has been like, these are not lawful. So what do you see him abiding by right now?
The Supreme Court said you have to give, with respect to the Alien Enemies Act, you have to give people due process. They have been giving people, the minimal due process that they're required. He'll probably lose the tariff case, but so far he's lost the tariff cases. He won't put the tariff in place if he loses the tariff case in the Supreme Court. The only one that he's arguably, the administration defied in those initial deportations where they were sending people on the planes. And I can make an argument either way. They definitely defied the spirit of that, the spirit of the Kilmar-Abrego case. But I don't know that they quite technically defied it. But every other decision has been, he's lost plenty of other decisions and abided by them. So, I don't think authoritarians do that.
Okay.
Interesting. I try to stay away from that word, but I'm actually really surprised to hear you say that because it feels very authoritarian to me in every way, shape, or form everywhere I look. I do want to get back to the tariffs you mentioned there. You think he will win or lose that? And
lose.
How important is that in terms of presidential powers?
Well, so he has lost the first two rounds of this in the trial court and then the Court of Appeals. And the Supreme Court told us a few days ago they are going to take this case and expedite it. I think we'll have a ruling by the new year. The reason I think he's going to lose is because what's really at play here is a conservative principle. Congress holds the tariff power, not the president. But Congress can delegate that tariff power. But there's this thing called the major questions doctrine, which conservatives love and have embraced over and over, that says if Congress intends to delegate a major power like the ability to bring tariffs, worldwide tariffs, they have to say so specifically. And what the law Trump is pointing to is this very general emergency powers law. And the lower courts have said, A, that law doesn't cover tariffs, and B, if it did, it has to be specifically given to him by Congress. So I think he's going to lose the tariff case in the Supreme Court. And by the way, I'm not entirely sure, speculating here, I'm not entirely sure Trump wants to win the tariff case in the Supreme Court because I think he realizes that at a minimum, they're causing uncertainty and disruption in the markets. And by the way, if he loses, isn't that great for him politically? Because then he can go, oh, these stupid liberal justices wouldn't let me do tariffs. And then every time there's a negative blip on the economy, he'll go, folks, well, these numbers ticked down, inflation ticked up, but if they let me did my tariffs, this never would have happened. Watch. If he loses, he's going to say that 1,000 times. Every bad thing that happens after that will be, it would have been prevented with tariffs, folks. What am I,
First, because there's all sorts of red flags right now with the economy. Job numbers, the inflation. Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was listening there.
I thought you were going to say something, but here's Elie, what I wanted to ask. What about the National Guard? Is he going to,
Yeah.
Where do we stand with cutting that down or allowing that?
I don't think he's going to be allowed to deploy the National Guard as things currently stand into Illinois, into New York, into, wherever else he said he's going to. The reason he's gotten away or been permitted to put the National Guard in. So DC, he controls the National Guard. He's the president. That's an exception. California, this went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, liberal court. They allowed him to do it. And they said because given the then ongoing ICE protests, it is necessary to protect federal assets and federal resources. There was an emergency law he had cited. But here's the problem. In California, those ICE protests are over. So I don't know how much longer he's going to be able to do it. And you don't have protests happening in Chicago or New York City. And so that legal hook that he used to win the National Guard case originally in California, that won't be there. And I don't think that saying, well, crime rates are really high and crime is dangerous, I don't think that's going to fit in the emergency law that he needs to deploy the National Guard. So I wrote a piece for New York Magazine a couple weeks ago where I argued, yes, he's deployed the National Guard in DC and California, and like it or not, he has been within the law. but don't look for that to extend elsewhere.
Elie, we're all old enough to remember, because it wasn't that long ago, Republicans calling President Obama an emperor who acted outside his legal authority. How far are we from that?
Oh, there's no comparison. I mean, the complaint with Obama is that he issued a lot of executive orders, basically, right? And now Trump is very much a fan of the executive order. Both of them, I think, took broad views of executive power, but Trump's in another league in terms of the things he's trying to do with respect to that power.
Elie, so that brings us to your book. Tell us the title.
When You Come at the King, I had to look at it. When You Come at the King Inside DOJ's Pursuit of the President from Nixon to Trump. Now, the title is, in my view, is a reference to Omar from The Wire, who famously said, "You come at the king, you best not miss." But my researchers found, and this is in the book, I should have known this, but Omar sadly did not invent that phrase. It goes back to Machiavelli and Ralph Waldo Emerson, and lots of other people have used it. But the themes of the book, first of all, part of the reason I like that title is talking to the people who live these cases, Watergate prosecutors, people on the Clinton team, the Ken Starr team, up through the current Jack Smith Mueller cases, is that all these folks realized that they were having the battles that would define their careers, their professional lives, their political lives. And, I did real trials, as many of these folks did, and I know the stress of it, and it feels all consuming. But when you add on to that, A, you're looking at the president, B, everything you're doing is being scrutinized by the media, and C, like, the president is ultimately your boss. Like, the intensity and the pressure to me felt like life or death. The other meaning, though, of course, of the title is that the retribution that we're seeing, you come at the king, you best not miss. Well, what's Trump doing now? He's lashing out at all the people who came after him in the past.
And which of those ways is the most alarming to you?
I think Trump was the one who really coined the phrase "investigate the investigators." And he did that during the Mueller investigation. And the guy he appointed at the time was this guy, John Durham, right? Well, he didn't appoint, but Bill Barr appointed. You remember Durham, right? The guy from Connecticut with the goatee and glaring and everything. And I do talk, by the way, in the book about the inflated expectations of both sides. You remember how Mueller was deified and turned into an action figure and T-shirts, and same thing to a lesser extent with Durham, same thing with Jack Smith. And none of them really delivered on what partisans were hoping. So he appoints Durham. Durham's case completely flops. In fact, I have an interview here with a guy who was prosecuted by Durham and found not guilty. This guy's name is Igor Danchenko. And even though he beat the case, Danchenko, it completely disrupted his life. Well, now Trump has taken that to the next level. He has launched investigations of Adam Schiff, of Letitia James. He has Jack Smith being investigated. He has Lisa Cook, the Fed governor, being investigated. So he has really taken this to another level of John Bolton, although John Bolton seems like there may be some substance to it separate from whatever retribution. But not only that, at the same time, while various presidents have tried to have interfered with these cases, Trump has made clear no one's going to be looking at me. Isn't it a miracle when you think back that Mueller was appointed during Trump's first term by Trump's own DOJ and was allowed, although Trump hated it and tried to obstruct him, let him finish his work. We will see nothing like that this term.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say the most alarming to me is the cleaning out of FBI agents who investigated January 6th. How important
That's in there. That's in the book. I mean, to fire not just the Jack Smiths and to go after the people, the powerful people who prosecuted you, but they fired the rank and file. They fired the third-year prosecutor who came over on a detail from some U.S. attorney's office. They fired FBI agents, anyone who touched this case. And by the way, in the book, I have this, the letter they sent to those people didn't even make any pretext. It didn't say, well, there's a reorganization. They said, you were part of the teams that prosecuted Donald Trump. Therefore, you're out of here with respect to Jack Smith's team. Everybody, paralegals, staff, clerks, you name it. So it's overtly retributive. It's not even controversial to say it's retributive. Their own words say it's retributive.
So, Elie, give us the juice. What's going to surprise us in your book?
There's so much good inside scoop. There's so many funny stories. I'll tell you, we're all roughly the same age. So I got a couple of really good admissions out of this guy named Saul Weisenberg. Saul was Ken Starr's basically number 2. And Ken Starr had not been a prosecutor before this. He was a solicitor general, which does appeals. But Saul Weisenberg had been a federal prosecutor in Texas and North Carolina before this. So Ken Starr, of course, passed away a couple years ago. So Saul, and I talked to Bill Clinton's legal team, this guy David Kendall, and I talked to Lanny Brewer, who worked in the White House then. So Saul made two great admissions to me. One is there's been a decades-long debate about, was Ken Starr's team leaking to the media? And it was pretty obvious they were, but they've never admitted it. And I said to Saul, I got to ask you straight up, did you guys leak? And I was expecting him to give a wishy-washy answer. He was a great interview. He said, oh, hell yes. He said, and it made me nuts because it was undermining our case. We found out who did it. We told them they had to take lie detector tests. They quit. And to this day, the people who did it claim that they quit because they objected morally to what we were doing or some BS. That was one. I love that admission. And there was another moment. Now, you all remember, I'm going to tell you something that will depress you. But you all remember the Starr report, right? When that came out. And that was the first thing that like crashed the internet. We were all download. So I have a bit in there about what a pop culture sensation the Starr report became. And I wrote in there, it sold whatever number of copies at Borders. Okay, you all know what I'm talking about. But I was told you need to add a parenthetical explaining what Borders is. So I have a parenthetical saying, Borders, parens, which was then a popular nationwide bookstore. And I'm like, it's sad that I have to explain this.
And was not a political wedge issue that helped Donald Trump win.
Right. Oh, good one. Exactly. So anyway, in the Mueller report, in the Starr report, there was so much sexual detail, right? And I knew what the Starr, the Clinton lawyers that I talked to went crazy as always and said, not in a bad way, but said it was outrageous. It was prurient. It was designed to humiliate the president. It was unnecessary. Now I knew what Starr's team's response was going to be. And Saul said the same thing they've been saying, which is, look, this is a perjury case. He was given a specific definition of sexual relations that listed certain body parts. And so it mattered. Did this body part touch that body part? And so we had to get into granular detail. And I said, I'm going to get like rated R and then some in a minute, but I said, okay, but you guys did list you wrote in the report 2 different times that after his encounters with Monica, Bill Clinton masturbated into the private Oval Office sink. What did that have to do with perjury? Did that go too far? And I see you both covering. And he said to me, yeah, maybe not that. That may have been too far. And I think that's the first time on record that anyone on Ken Starr's team has conceded that they might have gone a little too far with the sexual detail.
When I did Juicy, you delivered, Elie. I didn't know what I was getting there.
Good God, Allison.
That was a lot of wind up. I cannot unsee that. I will never unsee that.
Listen, it's in the Starr report. It's an official document of the U.S. government.
Bill Clinton jerking off into his sink is in the Starr report?
It's twice. Yes. It doesn't say it exactly that way, but it says the more technical term. And Dave, don't even start getting into the height issues here, Dave. He was tall.
Dave, it's not easy to derail and shock Dave Briggs.
Look at him. A good question someone asked me about that is, how would they have known that? And I think the answer is, remember Monica was being taped by Linda Tripp, right? She thought they were best friends, but Linda Tripp was recording her. And I believe that's something that Monica said she must have seen it. I mean, I don't know how else she would have known, that Monica said on tape to Linda Tripp. I'm not entirely sure how they know. They don't specify. I don't think Bill Clinton told them that.
He'd have to tell someone.
Yeah. Well, or Monica would have maybe seen it. I don't know. We could go down this rabbit hole.
That's a mystery.
It's hard to get out of this rabbit hole, but
be cracked.
I'm going to try. The book, obviously, some of this is granular details. So what's the selling point to the people that don't like to dive into legalese? Why is this book so important?
Yeah, so some of the early reviews have said it reads like a true crime book, right? Like a true thriller. You're in the courtroom, you're in the room when presidents are being interrogated. And so I love that aspect of it, right? I'm always going to like the stories and the action of it. But bigger picture, I think it's a really good way to understand not just the way DOJ has worked and not just the way special counsel has worked, but how do we collectively handle this problem of what do you do when your absolute most powerful person has done something that there needs to be at least an investigation of and potentially accountability for him. Struggle with that problem going back to Ulysses S. Grant. I mean, he was the first one to appoint somebody. And there is no easy answer to this. I say in the book, imagine you're in a scenario where you have to investigate your boss and your boss has the power to fire you and everything you are doing is being scrutinized by him, but you're the only person who's in position to bring real accountability. So we've struggled with that throughout our history, but I think it shows you sort of the way we've dealt with presidential power throughout our history, and then really tees us up for understanding where we are right now and why it's so fundamentally different from anything we've seen before.
Can't wait to read it, Elie. That sounds so good. You churn these out, man. It's really impressive.
It's my third in 5 years somehow. I don't know how.
How you do it. You're like the Ellen Hildebrand of legal. For a beach read every year.
And let me tell you, this one was fun, like, because I got to talk to all the people. I got to be like you guys, like real reporters, like, and some of the people were, I'll tell you one quick one. Judy Miller was a New York Times reporter who got locked up for 3 months because she wouldn't give up her sources in what became the Scooter Libby case, but the outing of Valerie Plame. You both covered this, I'm sure in detail. One of our former colleagues at CNN, one of my current colleagues at CNN, gave me her email and said, look, she's like a tough nut to crack. Like she's famously reclusive. She's no longer, writing for the Times, and she can be a little tough. So good luck. And I emailed her cold, and this sounds like I'm puffing myself up, but I would tell you her actual response to my email was a couple sentences. It was like, I know who you are. You're a good one. I'll talk to you. And she gave me like 3 hours of unbelievable stuff about what was it like as a New York Times reporter to go to federal prison for 3 months. She gave me the lipstick, the recipe for prison lipstick. She told me how she learned how to make it. It involves Skittles and M&Ms. I'm not going to give the whole thing away. But I got to do that kind of reporting and talk to these people who lived this stuff. And it was so much fun. In the book, it really it took a lot. Here it is. But it largely wrote itself around the experiences these people had. So thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
We used to interview Judy Miller every weekend. I do want to ask you about maybe your next book before you go, the Epstein trial, the now existence of the purported Donald Trump letter in the Epstein birthday book. How significant is it for the case, for the trial, for the Wall Street Journal News Corp lawsuit as well?
It's a big problem for Trump's lawsuit there, because remember, Trump's the plaintiff. He's the one asking for $10 billion. He has to prove that the Wall Street Journal's reporting was false and that they knew it was false or recklessly false. Okay, if you go back and look at Trump's lawsuit, and I did twice, he says that letter, whatever it is, that artwork that we've now seen is non-existent. Well, it's existent. And now he's left to say, but I didn't sign it, or I didn't know, or someone wrote it for me. But that doesn't matter. If you go back and look at the Wall Street Journal's article, they don't say they're careful. That I can see the lawyer's fingerprints all over this. They don't say he signed it. They actually say in the Wall Street Journal's article, the circumstances around the creation of this document are uncertain. You can't win a defamation case there. They are properly hedged. I don't think he wins anything on this case unless the Wall Street Journal just bails out and chooses to settle rather than go to trial, which is expensive.
And I'm not an attorney, but this seems like the dumbest lawsuit in history because, correct me if I'm wrong, now they want to get this thing tossed down. And I mean Trump, because if it's not tossed down, discovery, and he goes on the stand, this seems like the dumbest lawsuit I've ever seen. And
this is another one
in this history.
This is another one like the Tariffs case, where if I'm Donald Trump, I'm hoping I lose, because if the Wall Street Journal is going to make a motion to dismiss, if they win, the case is over. If they lose, we're into discovery. Donald Trump is the plaintiff. He will be deposed. He cannot avoid that. It will be under oath. There's no fifth here. He's the plaintiff. And what's the subject of that deposition going to be? Your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Every detail, every nut and bolt of how could he subject himself to this?
Do they have to make a motion to dismiss? Can they just press on the Wall Street Journal?
They do not have to. They could say that's really interesting. I mean, I bet they will, but they could say, no, we don't believe we have basis. We don't care to make that motion at this point. Let's go into discovery. And then that would be an interesting, chess, jujitsu move there.
Jackpot, baby. I mean, discovery was the whole reason that I was willing to bet $1,000 that he never went through with this lawsuit, because ultimately discovery is a disaster for Donald Trump. Real quickly, where does the Epstein situation go next? I do know House Oversight, they helped release that letter, but Senate Republicans stopped the process. What's next in this evolution, or can the administration simply turn this spigot off with continued distractions?
I think it's just going to be a slow drip. I think look, I said this early on, it was clear nobody else is ever going to be charged in this. And if that's what people are hoping for, it's it's clear that there's no appetite to do that. It's not going to happen. It didn't happen before. I think we're going to get a slow drip of documents coming out. The key thing that people are looking for, there is no client list per se. There's no piece of paper where Epstein said, let me write out all my clients. But I think what people are most interested in is, are there materials in these 300 gigabytes? We know there are 300 gigabytes of info. That's a ton, that implicate other people, powerful people, in criminal wrongdoing that we don't know of yet. That's what I'm looking to see. I don't know whether we'll ever get that answer, but I think it's just going to be this always in the background, slow drip.
Elie, so great to see you. This is wonderful. I'm really glad to hear about your book and to hear all of your hot takes.
Thank you, guys. It's always a joy to speak with both of you. I appreciate it.
It's out right now, so order it when you come at the King. It's in bookstores if you still use those. If not, get it on Amazon.
You can get it at
online.
Borders. It's actually a big hit at Borders.
Thank you, Elie.
Get it at B. Dalton.